Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Impact Factor. I am your host, Katie Van Aken, and this episode is another special interview to me. I have known Jamie DeNizio for, I think we decided, going on 16 years, and in those 16 years, we played soccer together, we went to college together, and we both pursued our PhDs in very different fields. But we enjoyed it nonetheless. So I'm excited for you to hear all of her wisdom and all of the cool stuff that she's doing. So without further ado, here's Jamie DeNizio, PhD. Wow, okay, where do we start? How long have we known each other?
Okay, we first met in the fall of 2007?
Seven? Yeah.
Yes, when I was a freshman in college at Haverford, you were a prospective
A little
soccer
baby high schooler.
schooler.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. So what is that? 16 years?
Damn,
Good math.
it's crazy.
I mean, that's cool. I love that. That's great, you know.
Yeah.
And now we can talk about your journey.
Yeah,
So
before we had a same PhD journey, we had a soccer journey together. So
it's true. I've interviewed many soccer players on this podcast.
Ooh,
For some reason, there's a weird soccer PhD overlap. So mostly in my world, but so when I met you, you were a freshman at Haverford. Were you at that point declared in a major?
No. I went to Haverford knowing I was interested in science, but I was one of those people who was like, I love to learn. I'm going to keep an open mind. And for a hot minute, spring freshman year, I was like, I'm going to be a religion major. Then that lasted like 2 seconds. So I was pre-med when I came, and I remained pre-med until fall of my junior year. But I guess that was after I had declared a chemistry major.
Mm-hmm.
So other than my 2 minutes of considering religion, I was pretty set it was going to be either biology or chemistry.
Which always aligned well with the pre-med because of the requirements matching up. Yeah. Obviously, I know that Haverford has a kind of a thesis requirement. So what was your undergraduate research experience like?
So when I decided to major in chemistry, some of the chemistry professors were surprised because my grades were like fine. Like they were good, not great. And most of the people who chose chemistry over biology had great grades in chemistry. I'm not much of a natural test taker, and
that's where grades come from.
Yeah, exactly. And so I reached out to Karin Ackerfeld, my first mentor, to just be exposed to a lab before you can even choose to do something. I was like, well, let me just be in a lab. And she was the first person who really believed in me and thought that despite not being a good test taker, that I might have a natural aptitude for research. So I did a little, like I cleaned glassware and I like weighed out reagents my sophomore and junior year and started to do some really small scale experiments. And then, end of junior year, started talking about potential projects. And I decided to pursue a new project she had in mind, which was investigating the use of peptides to form hydrogels, because she had a theory that this particular peptide from actually a protein in semen, um,
Hmm.
could have antimicrobial properties. So that came later, and that actually 5 years after my senior thesis, it got published.
Wow.
So yeah, way later, but I the first part was just forming the hydrogels and synthesizing the peptides, and so that's what I did my research on.
5 years later, were they using the same process that you
Um,
designed?
I think that they were using the generation two that I proposed in my future directions.
Nice.
Yeah, because it
Nice.
formed um, the beta sheet structures, and there was an additional sequence that I thought that could enhance the rigidity of the hydrogels. Yeah.
Wow. Very cool.
Mhm.
So that was your undergraduate thesis.
Yes.
Did you, I assume you enjoyed research at that point?
Yes. And although I wasn't necessarily like, I'm going to get a PhD, I'm going to be a scientist, I knew med school wasn't for me. As I learned more about the test taking
Mm,
structure, the time commitment, the match system, and how you don't really have control of where you live. I just knew that that wasn't going to be a good lifestyle for me, and that I was going to find a way to pursue my interests in health, medicine another way.
mm,
Yeah, but still wasn't on paper. My path reads very linearly, and
mm,
it was anything but. Basically, every 2 to 4 years would reassess.
mm.
So it looks straight, but at the time, I mean, I at each point considered a myriad of things, like
Right.
really anything I could consider.
Yeah, that's actually interesting because, there's certainly people who know exactly what their path's going to be and it looks straight and it is straight and yours looks straight, but, at all of those points you could have pivoted and, who knows what. So it's how interesting what everyone's journey looks like is very different.
Yeah, I was a minor in art history, and I considered being an art conservator because of my interest in chemistry and art. And, my twin
Oh,
sister is an
whoa.
artist. So I looked into doing internships in that after I graduated. I applied to labs. I applied to nonprofits. I really my application process was also information gathering,
Yeah.
and I was like, well, I'll try this first.
Yeah. Um, just a sidebar. That's an exact example. That's a perfect example of like a career path that um, is like perfect for some sort of combination of expertise and interest, but that
Hmm.
you would never think about as like no chemistry program is going to be like, oh, by the way, you could do this with art.
Yeah,
So my next podcast is going to be interviewing people who do that kind of stuff, and so
love
that
it.
people can like learn about it because I think there's so many cool jobs like that, but like you never know. When you
Yeah,
when you study chemistry in college, they're like you can be a chemist. Cool.
yeah, that's definitely true.
Okay, so you applied, and then so where did you end up going after Haverford?
So I ended up in a biochemistry, biophysics lab at the Perelman School of Medicine at the University of Pennsylvania. So Dr. Ben Black, uh, was my PI, and I, yeah, it was very intense. Like
Mm,
going from Haverford to there was a steep learning curve, and I was doing very technically difficult mass spec experiments.
mm,
We had, the barest mass spec experience uh, at Haverford. Um,
yeah.
so I had to learn very quickly. Yeah,
Was um it was a like a research assistantship? What is that role?
yeah. It was a lab technician or something.
Okay.
But a former Haverford grad male soccer player, Brian Wexler, had worked there I think 2 years prior. And so I guess he had paved the way for Haverford people performing well. So I think I think that helped me get the job, to be honest.
Well, now I don't know if it now the pipeline is strong. There's so many people
Yeah,
I talk to who start
yeah,
doing just a break in their studies to do research at Penn. Okay, so
yeah.
what
So
did you
I
learn during
really,
that? Go ahead.
so well, I wanted to have a job that I could figure out if I wanted to pursue science. And I also wanted a job that wasn't too strenuous, that I could learn how to be an adult and live my life and enjoy my life. And I also used that time to learn about other jobs. So um, I tried to use my network as much as I could, and former colleagues of my dad, friends' parents, anybody who had a job that I thought I might like. I just had an informational phone call or a coffee if they were in Philly. Sometimes it was 5 minutes, sometimes it was an hour. Um,
Yeah.
and very quickly it was like, okay, I do want to do science. All these people, even though they say they don't use their PhD, they have one. All these people with
Hmm.
jobs that sound interesting to me have a PhD. I'm like, do you think you need it to do your job? And a lot of them would say no.
Yeah.
But I was like, darn.
Yeah.
So I knew I probably wanted to end up in industry, but I started my PhD with an open mind.
Hmm.
Yeah. And
I
I
like that.
knew pretty firmly though that I did not want to go into academia.
Yeah. But you were open to that changing if it did. And
Yeah,
typically it
I was
changes
open to
the
that.
reverse direction. But
Hmm.
um, um, that's so interesting because I've also heard multiple times people say that while while working with PhDs or talking with people who have their PhD, they get excited about the things that they're doing, and that's sort of what answers the question of should I go get a PhD? And similarly, like, do you need one to do the work? Probably not, but
Oh no, everyone in the lab was like, don't do it.
yeah,
They were like, don't
because
do
they were
it.
all
And
in it, right?
yeah, yeah, they were like, don't do it. I was like, I think I have to do it. So my
Yeah,
situation was a little unique. You know, Ben Black knew that I was thinking of applying. I took the GRE. I missed the cycle, and I was like, oh, I guess I'm gonna stay for a third year, or I'm gonna, I don't know, go do something else while I apply.
yeah,
But a spot opened up at Penn, and um, there's no way to say this in a like non-obnoxious way. I did a really good job in my job.
yeah. Well, you
So
were a known quantity, right?
yes,
Like you worked in the department, like they know who you are.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
spot opened up and they said, you want it? And I was like, yeah, cool. And I don't have to do the interview rounds and I can have a spot at this Ivy League institution for my PhD. Like, okay,
didn't
sure.
you like have to decide in like 2 days too?
Yeah, I had to decide in 2 weeks. Um,
Oh, okay,
and my wrapping up my job actually bled into starting my PhD. So for like 2 months, I was kind of doing double duty of
that's tough.
yeah, submitting a first author paper and starting a PhD.
Whew. Was it the same department but different lab? Am
Yeah.
I remembering
Yep.
that right? Yeah.
So same department. So Ben Black it does epigenetics research. I actually haven't totally kept tabs, but at the time was really focused on the kind of unique proteins that identify the um, chromatin at the centromere, and was doing
Whoa, whoa,
but
whoa. Those are big words.
so when DNA compacts and forms chromosomes. There
Uh-huh.
is a nucleating point that
That's called the
directs
centromere.
splitting. So and DNA
Uh-huh.
replicates in order for cells to split.
Yeah.
I'm going to be really embarrassed if I'm getting this wrong. I haven't thought about any of this in a really long time, but
It's like
and
riding a
so there
bike.
there are proteins that are unique to um, I can't even remember. The DNA wraps around proteins as it compacts, and there are unique proteins, SEMPE,
Okay.
in the centromere. So I was doing biophysical
Huh.
characterization, um, and that's kind of part of the field of epigenetics. So basically, things that affect your genome that is not the AGTC DNA code.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And so I knew I was interested in epigenetics. I wanted to
Hmm.
pursue that. As an identical twin, I once I found out about it, I thought that was fascinating. Because
Yeah.
my sister and I are the same genome, but have a lot of differences. So I wanted to understand that. But yes, same department, different lab for my PhD.
Very cool. Um, what was it like um was your program one of the programs where you basically get accepted into a lab, or do you do rotations?
Did
Did you do rotations?
rotations. I also, despite struggling in my PhD, I loved my department. I
Mm.
it was, and I loved so many of the PIs. That's not what I struggled with.
Yeah.
It was collaborative. It was supportive. It was well funded. It was an amazing experience. I did rotations, um, and I really wanted to join Rahul Kohli's lab for uh, the science that I could do, but also I thought that he and I would be a good fit, and I liked the people in the lab. But he didn't really have space. There were a
Mm.
bunch of MD PhDs that he had already accepted, and I basically kind of bullied my way in. I was like, I'm great.
Nice.
You should take me.
And I'm not going to get my MD at the same time, so you should take me.
Yeah, yeah. So I took a risk. I had two other great options, but that's what I really wanted, and it worked out. So it was nice.
And it was also epigenetics.
So the reason I really wanted to join his lab because he's an MD PhD, and I was still really looking for a way, despite being a biochemist and loving mechanism, I really wanted
Mm.
to find a way for my science to be related to human health and medicine.
Cool.
It's really hard to find in basic biochemical research.
Yeah.
And my project was related to epigenetics, but didn't really touch public health more broadly. But the other side of the lab did antibiotic resistance research.
Oh,
So
cool.
even though I wasn't working in that, I got to be a part of those lab meetings and um, was exposed to the medical system because there were so many MD PhDs, and I kind of learned a lot outside of my exact area of study because I was in that lab. Um,
That's cool.
yeah.
I I had a similar experience because we my lab focused on energy storage, but there was a whole other half of our lab that did drug delivery systems,
Yeah.
using the same nanomaterials, but for a whole
Oh,
different application. And I always enjoyed those conversations because I knew nothing about it, but I was like, "Wow, you're using the same carbon that I'm using, but you're doing something else with it." It's very cool.
yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. Um, I have this weird, vague memory that you were also doing like a minor or something in
Yeah.
health something something.
Mhm. So um, I did, I guess it was a certificate throughout my entire PhD. I was involved with a public health program for PhDs. So it was associated with, so my PhD was at the med school um,
Mm.
in the biochemistry biophysics department at the med school, part of Penn. So it was other PhDs in cell biology, cancer biology, genetics, and stuff like that from the med school who had a public health interest. And so there were seminars. We had to take public health courses with the public health masters and PhD students. And then we had to do a kind of capstone project to get this certificate.
Mm.
And I did something totally unrelated to epigenetics, but I I literally forgot about this until right now. I wrote a paper about the pathogenic threat of Tough Mudder races and mountain biking. So I worked with this guy. The reason I chose this project was because the guy that I worked with, David Hewitt, is an
Yeah.
ecologist. He is the coolest guy I've ever met. And now I'm going to go reach out to him. Maybe I'll send this podcast to him. Hey, David. I haven't talked to him in
Yeah.
ages, but he is just one of those fascinating people who gets involved in all this different stuff. And this was one
Yeah.
of his areas of study was, antibiotic resistance and the pathogenicity of certain public bodies of water and mud. And as a sports
Ew.
person, I focused on tough mudders and mountain bike races. Yeah.
Wow. So, but that's not his focus. That's just where you took it?
It's part of his focus.
Okay.
He I think he works for the government now in DC. But he was a like ad hoc lecturer at adjunct lecturer at Penn. Um,
Hmm.
I can't even remember how he got connected.
Well, I would love to talk to him. That would be a cool interview too. So,
Yeah, he's the coolest guy. Great
yeah.
energy.
Yeah. So that was your, so you were like, let's just write a paper on something really random that's nothing to do with what I'm doing on the day to day.
Yeah, but and I mean, I through being in my lab, I had learned more and had become more interested in kind of uh, infectious diseases.
Mm.
Um, and I kind of explored that interest in a couple other things I did at Penn, which in post-COVID is wild. Something else I did, well, I'm sure you have questions, but I know that one of your questions is about other things I did at Penn.
Yeah, great.
So basically, because I knew I didn't want to go into academia, but I didn't quite know exactly what I wanted to do, I was like, let me explore all the things so that, one, to build up my resume, but also because I wanted to figure out what I wanted to do. Like, I didn't see a good way to do that other than try things. So,
And a university is a wealth of knowledge for those things, like you're in a good place to be doing that.
and I mean, just what an like to formally acknowledge the immense privilege that I had, both in the way that I was accepted into the program and the opportunities that were afforded to me being at an R01
Mm.
institution and, such a big school like Penn. It's tough for people to have access to that stuff in other programs. And I am like really grateful. And I definitely was not going to let that pass me by. Um,
Yeah.
I I did all the things.
Like,
So one of the other things I did was in 2015, 2016, the Trump era, I got very involved in science policy.
mm,
That was kind of the first time that I had seen science as threatened, and that kind of evoked something in me. And I wanted to pursue whether or not a job in policy is something that I would enjoy. So um, a kind of older student in my department had started the Penn Science Policy Group, and it had grown, and there were people from other departments and other schools as well. So the biology, chemistry programs at kind of Penn proper as well. And so through that group, I was involved in a number of different projects and activism things. But one of the coolest things I did was help them um, plan public forum about what Philadelphia would do if there was ever a pandemic.
No way.
I swear. So this was kind of Zika and Ebola, and like we're talking about those things,
Yeah.
examining how Philly responded in those and talking about it on a grander scale. But we had people from the public health department, from city council, um, scientists, and we held both a closed door and a public forum. And then we went down to DC and met with other groups from around the country who had held similar forums and kind of created this big document like, are our cities prepared to respond?
Wow.
Now, like when the outbreak happened, I was like, well, at least I knew Philly was pretty ready. And guess what?
I
Philly
was
did
gonna
pretty
ask.
good.
Yeah.
They did pretty good. Their information management system and their communication tools.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what we came out of it. Was like, hey, Philly's doing okay.
Wow, that's crazy. But there were
No.
cities and locations that were not as prepared based on
Yeah.
what you learned.
And a lot of it was kind of less technological infrastructure. Data
Mm.
management stuff was the big missing link. Yeah. So, through that work, like art conservatorship though, those jobs are far and few between, and
Yeah.
I ultimately decided that that was something that I would stay involved in, and that might be something that, I get more involved in later in my career, or, if I find a particular avenue, I make a jump or something, but I didn't want to do that start.
Yeah.
Um,
That's good.
and then the last thing I did
Mm.
was I was like, all right, I need to really ask myself if I want to do industry. So I got involved with
Um,
the Penn Biotech Healthcare Healthcare Consulting Group. So
sure.
it's science, it's PhDs and MBA students who got
Oh,
linked up with companies or startups who were looking for free consulting, basically. And you did like we did a mini consulting project.
huh.
And I thrived. I was not in charge, and I just took charge, and I was like, this is for me. I love this.
Wow. What a great experience. Because, like, when else would you ever learn that you like that kind of stuff, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, I knew I didn't want to be a consultant, but the aspects of the work, the strategy of science and decision making is kind of
Yeah.
what I'm doing now. And that's what I enjoyed.
Yeah. Um, well, that's a great segue. So, what are you doing now, Jamie?
So now I work for uh, when I joined, it was a small 10-person startup. Actually, we're in stealth mode when I first joined or signed my contract.
Hmm.
Um, and it was a gene editing company uh, with the ultimate goal of curing cardiovascular disease. So that's kind of our big banner headline. And we are now 250 people. Um,
Holy shit.
yeah, so um, we have a
Wow.
big shiny new office in Fenway, and the company is Verve Therapeutics. I am on the editing team, specifically work in development, and co-lead a team developing, well, initially I was involved in developing primarily sequencing-based assays in order to assess whether our gene editing therapeutic um, is causing off-target editing or structural damage. I
Like
can
side effects.
yeah, so involved in safety. So I was initially kind of involved in the development of those assays, and now involved in leading the team, collecting the data for our main drug candidates. I can talk more about what our drug product actually is if I realize I'm being kind of vague.
No, it's fine. I mean, I don't know. Sometimes high level is better. I mean, what's cool though is it sounds like you're doing the science, but you also have this, connection to the patient, which is this disease that you're trying to cure, which is sort of what you said was your
Yeah,
sweet spot early on, right?
yeah. So when it's actually kind of funny the way things work out. When I was interviewing, the day that I interviewed at Penn for that first job, Ben Black's lab,
Mm.
my dad had a heart attack. I was a senior in college,
Whoa.
and he survived. He's thriving, dad.
Yeah.
um,
If you're listening, Mr.
but
DeNizio.
but yeah, that was very, traumatic, significant moment in my life. And so I just can't believe like feel passionately about disease we're curing. And also the gene editing therapy um, is related to my PhD work. So like in a
Mm.
really high level way. So our first two programs are using well, it's CRISPR-Cas based, but using a base editing protein. So making a single base change in the genome.
Hmm.
So going from an A to a adenine to a guanine.
Gotcha.
But my PhD, I worked on base modifying enzymes. So that
Hmm.
knowledge has directly translated to kind of the work that I do now.
Wow. Do you spend a lot of time like on the at the bench,
I
as
haven't
advocates say?
done an experiment since September 2021. I'm a manager
Wow.
now.
Just in meetings all day.
Yeah, in meetings and looking at data with my team and yeah,
Yeah. It's cool. Do you like that though?
do. I really do. Um what's really fun about this field is that there isn't a playbook, which is both
Mm.
stressful and things change constantly, but the field, regulatory, the FDA and all of the
Mm-hmm.
other competing companies are trying to figure out the best way to assess these new therapies. This
Yeah.
is a new field of science. So there's a lot of strategy that goes into not just the execution, but also how we craft the package and the narrative around our drug products.
Wow. That's very cool. And yeah, it's just the same as like, I work in software, so like machine learning and stuff for medical purposes. That's all like still being figured out. How do you even handle that?
I
So,
use Chat GPT every day at work.
do
And this
you?
is this is an aside. How much
Okay.
easier would our PhDs have been if we had Chat GPT?
Oh my God, tell me about it.
Like, I'm not like it's not doing my job, but the number of times I ask a basic science question that usually I'd have to like read four different links and four different papers to like
Yep.
pull an answer together in my brain, just gives me. It does that for me.
Yeah. Good old chat. He'll put it
Ugh,
together for you.
I'm obsessed.
I'm planning to do an episode, spoilers for the listeners, about how ChatGPT is going to affect research and PhD. So maybe I'll have you on as a guest.
Amazing.
Um,
I want to say something about my PhD because
okay.
I'm realizing that it sounds like I just had this fabulous time. I did, but I didn't. I mean, you were there.
Yeah,
I was
I
like,
was.
I was
I
like pretty
I didn't
miserable.
see you for weeks sometimes because you were. Yeah.
But
Well, okay.
it
So
wasn't
one of my
even that I was
questions.
working. Like I
Yeah.
struggled with my
Sad.
mental health.
Sad.
Like, yeah,
Yeah.
like, it was very isolating for me. And I really had to dig and push myself to do these other things to
Yeah.
stave off that isolation because um, I'm a team person. That's why I love where I am at now. It's why I loved playing soccer. Like, really struggled with how lonely it can be because the only person who cares about what you're doing really is you.
Yep. And
Yeah.
nobody else cares if you defend this year or 5 years from now. So
Yeah.
it's tough.
I mean, your PI
It's,
hopefully cares, but still,
they're also super
sometimes not
busy and
really.
they. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes they'd rather you stick around.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely tough. I think the individual journey, the individualness of the journey is both the coolest thing and also the most challenging thing about the PhD process because you really become uh you learn so many different skills because you're on your own, but you also struggle because you're on your own. So,
I think you did a good job at that too. You got involved in a lot of different stuff.
oh yeah, sometimes I think back, well, in my 5th year when I was like wrapping up, I look back on my 4th year and I was like, I don't think I did any like real things during that year. Like what I was like organizing events and like part of the student council and like what even happened. Going to conferences. I do love a good conference though.
Oh,
That's like
me
my favorite
too.
thing.
And we could have
Yeah.
done more science, but honestly, all those experiments probably would have failed anyway. So, you know what? We did enough.
You know, we did enough. That's the key. Um,
Uh,
all right. Well, is there anything else you wanted to touch on? Otherwise, I'll jump to my like wrap up questions.
um, I guess, no. I mean, what are your listeners looking for? Is this these people? Do you know what
Yeah,
your
I mean,
demographic is?
it's
Are they
interesting.
looking
It's
for advice or
I think a lot of it
stories?
is like solidarity in the sense that like
Mm,
those of us who have been through it also felt lonely and
yeah.
um struggled with that. But like for example, looking back on it, what advice would you give to yourself in that
Mm.
first year?
Um, well, I wouldn't have cared about, I should have cared about my classes less.
Yep.
Like,
But that's hard to do, right?
yeah, and I did learn like they were foundational. Like they were, because
Yeah.
I don't know. I needed more biology to be in that program and where I am now. So, but like grades didn't matter.
You don't need to ace it.
No. Yeah, just get a pass. Um, and then I guess I would have just wanted to reassure myself, trust myself. Like,
Hmm.
I think even though I haven't ever done long-term planning, like I seriously, each step of the way, I'm like, I could be a florist. Like,
Yeah.
like, I have subconsciously listened to my gut, and I just would urge myself to, I did need to do it, and I did it, and I hated it most of the time. I
Hmm.
survived, and now I have a job I love. So
There you go.
yeah,
Yeah, I
I did
think
a bunch of fun stuff too.
yeah.
Keep doing the fun stuff, because like even if you bail and you're like, I can't, like you got to keep living your life.
Hmm. Yeah, it's hard to not let it consume your life, but that's
Yeah,
a big piece of surviving is keeping that from happening.
yeah,
Um, Also, what you said about trusting your gut, that's an interesting, and I really like that as advice because, you know, many of us have made it this far from doing exactly that, right? And so at that's the critical point at which you should absolutely be trusting your gut.
yeah.
Um, all right, well, let's end with a nice question of what is a good memory or story you have from your time there? Conference trip, night in the lab. Yikes.
Um, so I made two I made two really well, I had lovely people in my lab,
Yeah.
great friends. I made two lifelong friends who, one of which is here in Boston and I see, um, who I have many happy memories with. Um, Drinking, concerts, just, we doing experiments together, but also living our lives together. I was at both of their weddings, threw one of them a bachelorette party, um, hoping to meet the other one's baby soon.
Wow.
I, yeah, oh, okay, so the happy memory with one of those people, my friend Monica, we went to a conference in California together with our PI, and we blew off the afternoon of talks because it was the first day of March Madness and St. Patrick's Day, and we did a basketball craft beer pub crawl
Oh my god.
in like Ventura, California, and it was
And that's what you
delightful.
remember, not the afternoon of talks or the
Now,
morning
I
of
went to
talks.
some sick conferences,
Yeah.
and only one of them was actually pretty relevant. I, I chose based on location.
Well,
And you
that's
know
advice
what?
right there.
Do you know why that was okay? Because I knew I wasn't going into academia. If you know
True.
you're not going into academia, it doesn't really matter if you're networking at conferences.
True.
Doesn't. I went to the
And
Bahamas, Germany, California.
and you're still giving talks or posters, right? So you're still practicing that skill set, which is important for whatever you're going to do.
Yeah,
You just happen to be doing it in the Bahamas.
it was awesome. That one was like, I gave a talk at that one.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Um, Very cool.
Well, I have one last thing I want to say to your listeners.
Please.
Negotiate your first offer.
Mm.
Not enough, especially the ladies out there. Not enough. Women that I work with that started at our company who started from a postdoc or straight out of their PhD. I am the only one that I've talked to. I'm sure some of them did, but I'm the only one that I've talked to who negotiated their starting offer.
Yeah.
It makes a difference.
It does, and as someone coming out of a PhD, we don't really have a sense for what we should be paid, so that's hard.
Yeah.
But it's certainly worth having the conversation because what's the worst that could happen? They say no.
But they expect, at this point, they expect you to negotiate. So
Yeah, good advice.
thanks.
Um, Anything you want to plug about your company?
Well, we had a
Are
birthday
you
party
hiring?
today. We're not
Okay.
hiring. We had a birthday party today because we celebrated our 5-year anniversary and
Wow.
had little party hats and little kazoos, and there was a slideshow and cake.
Best day ever.
What do I want to plug about our company? It's going to be a big year. I just, I think, I believe in what we're doing, and
That's great.
I'm
That's
hoping
all
for
that
good
matters.
things. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, Jamie, it was a pleasure to talk to you. Your wisdom is unmatched. Um,
Stop.
um,
Me too.
thanks for coming on the show and spending some time with us, with me and listeners, and I'm sure they will enjoy it.
This is great. Thank you. I can't wait to go listen to every other episode you've recorded.
Thanks to Jamie for coming on the show. If you or someone you know wants to be interviewed on Impact Factor, feel free to reach out via Instagram and follow us for updates at @ImpactFactorPod. Thank you all for listening and have a great week.